Hey, I'm Rachel, and this is Over for Coffee. Let me tell you my story. So, first of all, I am indeed drinking coffee. This is Intelligentsia's El Diablo, and I made this with my I made this with my AeroPress, which is great for single servings of coffee. Now, it is a stronger roast. My preference is espresso. So El Diablo is a bolder roast, and I got some milk and some sugar in there. Second of all, neither of these have anything to do with the rest of the story. I am not a nail polish girl, but every once in a while I get that itch. And so instead of paying to get a manicure, and I don't like how they shave down your nail beds, I purchased some press-ons from Amazon that don't even require glue. And my total was like $6.01. So I'm like, well, if they don't work out, I'm not out much. So I got it's like Never Too Navy from Impress by Kiss. If you're interested, I'll link them down below. I was very pleased. They've only been on for about 24 hours, so we'll see how long they last. The box said that it's not recommended to wear them for more than 7 days. So if these last 7 days, 10 out of 10 would recommend. But the reason you are here, so this channel, this podcast, wherever you're listening, my vision is for me to be able to use this as a platform to walk alongside and grow and learn with people who are healing their relationship with food, healing from disordered eating, and deciding that they want to live a healthier lifestyle. And that includes food and fitness. So the reason why I am passionate about food and fitness and health is because of my story, what I've experienced in my life so far. And so I'm going to share that with you. Growing up, I grew up in a very healthy household, I'd say. Whole grains, brown rice, fruits, vegetables, lean meats. I was still allowed to eat candy. There were baked goods, some processed food, but like when it came to cereal, it was never, like sugary cereal was a very rare occasion, as an example. And I was always an active child, spent a lot of time playing outside. And then I was introduced to sports, and so I was always involved in sports every school year. It was just something you did. It's what my classmates did, so it's what I did. And when you're a kid and you're active and you're growing, you can eat a lot of food. You can basically eat whatever you want, and your body burns it off because it's growing or because you're being so active. I remember specifically in 10th grade, it was the fall, it was volleyball season, and I remember saying, I feel like my metabolism is slowing down. And I said that because in years previous, for example, if I went to Subway, I could eat a foot-long sub with chips, and then like an hour later, there's this one specific instance where I had a foot-long sub and chips, and then an hour or two later, I had like an orange Julius from Dairy Queen. And I never remember being full, like uncomfortably full. Until 10th grade, I started getting that feeling, like I couldn't eat as much as I had previously. And when I had said that around a couple of people, and they're like, no. And now, of course, I know I was right. Like, your intuition is a powerful thing. But I was in 10th grade. I was still growing. I know some people stopped growing earlier, but I was still growing. My body was still developing. And I had this mindset of like, oh, my body's done growing, like I should fit into my clothes still. But I felt like my clothes were getting tighter. And this was all kind of around the time where when you're younger, your parents tell you like, or they give you what you can eat. And this was around the time where it was more of my own decision making on what I was going to eat and how much I was going to eat. And I didn't like how my body was fitting into my clothes. So instead of knowing like, oh, you're still growing, you just need to go get new clothes that fit my body, I felt like I needed to fit my body into the clothes. So I also felt like I was slightly out of control with how I was eating. With more freedom to choose when I ate and what I ate, part of me had always felt restricted in like, don't eat too much candy, don't eat too much before bed. Just kind of those simple things that, like, don't eat too much candy is a beneficial thing, like for your teeth, for your body. It's not very nutrient dense. It's not nutrient dense. But I wanted more of that food. It was like my rebellion almost. And so with eating more like sweets, I was also like sneaking it because I knew like it wasn't good for me and I didn't want any comments to be said if I was seen eating sweets during a time like right before supper or something. So when my clothes started to get tighter and I started feeling kind of like I was going a little crazy with eating more than I needed and eating like quote unquote bad food, I started writing down, keeping track of what I was eating. At this point, it wasn't how much I was eating. It was just, okay, I had breakfast for cereal. For breakfast, I had cereal. And then for lunch, I had a sandwich and this and this. And then when I got home, I had this snack. And then I had supper. And then I had this bedtime snack. And I was trying to limit myself to, okay, you can only eat like 7 items. Like it didn't matter how much, but it was only like, you can only eat this many times per day. So it was like keeping a food diary. And now I'm like, no high schooler needs to be doing that. No high schooler needs to be doing that. And I'm not placing any blame on circumstances or people, but I think it was my environment and like things that you hear. Like as a child, you listen. You are listening to what's going on. And so I started the food diary, and then I don't know what triggered this to happen, but I went from, okay, you can only eat like 7 times a day or 7 specific items a day to, okay, no more snacks. We're gonna have breakfast, we're gonna have lunch, we're gonna have dinner, and that's it. And it wasn't just, okay, you can have this, you can have this, you can eat 3 times a day. That wasn't just it. It was, you can choose one item basically for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So for breakfast, I could have either cereal or oatmeal or pancakes or something, and then a large glass of milk, because I knew that helped fill me up and that was satisfying. But then you can't eat until like lunchtime. So like when lunchtime came around, maybe it was like, if it was the weekend, it would be 1 slice of pizza and a large glass of milk. And then whatever it was for dinner, I would always eat what was given for dinner because we always ate together as a family. So of course I didn't want anyone suspecting like what I was trying to do. Now, of course I got hungry in between, so like I didn't consider what I was drinking. So I drank a lot of like Crystal Light or low calorie drinks that tasted good. So Diet Pop, like I said, Crystal Light, any of those drink packets. I would drink a ton of those in between meals because I was hungry. I was a 15-year-old. I was growing, I was active, and I was restricting my body because I felt like I needed to fit into my clothes. So that kicked into gear. I remember definitely the summer between 10th grade and 11th grade. So then 11th grade, class started, and I was still doing the breakfast, the lunch, and supper. And I remember just, I don't know how we survived high school. I got up just after 6. I remember I would eat breakfast by 6:30. And at that point in my life, on school days, it was just cereal, like Cheerios with a little granola or something. And nowadays, that keeps me full for like 2 hours. So like 6:30 breakfast and then 11:30, 12 o'clock lunch. In my life today, that does not work for me. So into the fall, I was comfortable in my clothes. I felt comfortable in my body, but I was hungry. And I didn't want to put any weight back on. That was my mindset. And so I was like, okay, I want a way to maintain this. Like, I don't want to put weight back on. And so I don't remember the research on it, but I made the decision that I was going to start calorie counting, and I came across this number of calories you should eat by pound of body weight that you want to stay at, and that is how much I decided I was going to eat. And with that, it allowed me to eat snacks in between my meals. So started doing that, and I ate frequently. I ate 6 times a day. Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack. I remember I would pack usually like a small, like half a sandwich to eat usually during biology or chemistry class. It was an hour or two before lunchtime. And I kept doing that. And then in the spring, I remember it was the end of the boys' basketball season. And my best friend from high school, her mom saw me. I didn't see her, but her mom saw me and had talked to my mom. And then my mom told me when we were both home, like, oh, so-and-so saw you and she asked me if you were sick. And that was a point where I realized, like, oh, like I'm really thin. And up until this point, like, I knew that I hadn't put weight back on. And I knew I was fitting into clothes that were smaller than I had previously worn, or I was fitting back into clothes that were getting tight on me at the point where I started restricting how often I could eat. And they were starting to get looser, which made me feel comfortable because I'm like, okay, my clothes aren't too tight. But at the same time, I wasn't eating enough and I was freezing all the time. I was so cold in school. And at this time, I had dropped one of the sports that I was in. And I don't know, maybe if you're like 20 to 35 years old right now, did you ever get agendas or planners for school that they'd have the weekdays and you could put in your assignments and stuff, like what you had to do? I was constantly calculating how many calories I had eaten that day and how many I had left to work with. And I was to a point where I always wanted to make sure I had like some extra for like a really nice snack after supper. But I was consumed with lording over my food. And it makes me sad thinking about it now, but during this time, it had been a classmate's birthday, and she brought in cupcakes, and she went around the class and everyone took one, and I said, no, thank you. And as someone who loves to bake and loves to make food for people and gets joy from seeing other people enjoy that, it may not seem like a big thing, but it makes me really sad that I didn't just take the cupcake. I didn't have to eat it, but like now, I don't take it personally, but if someone doesn't want something that I made and offer to them, I'm like, okay. But I get joy when like they do take it. So if I could go back, I would take that cupcake, even if I didn't eat it. And additionally, closer to the time when my friend's mom had asked if I was sick because I was so thin, my dad had said, he's like, I think you need to eat more protein. I don't exactly know how he said it, when he said it. He was like, you need to eat more protein. And he was partially right. Like, I just needed to eat more. And so I did. I got some protein powder and I got some protein bars. And the protein powder was gross. But the protein bars were good because they're basically candy bars. However, the protein bars still fit into my caloric range. So like, I wasn't gonna put on any weight because I wasn't eating any more calories. I don't know how skinny I was at my lowest weight because I have a picture of me from like Christmas, but it wasn't until March. March is when my friend's mom made the comment about me looking sick. And in December, I was thin. And I never weighed myself very often, but I remember the last time I weighed myself was shortly-ish before that comment about how thin I was made. And so I don't know how low my weight got, and I'm not going to share that, but it was 25 to 30 pounds lighter than I am now. And now I have a lot more muscle mass, so I'm heavier because of the muscle, but I may not be bigger because the muscle takes up less space than fat per pound. So I was thin. So I don't know what exactly triggered it, but I think my body was just like, we cannot sustain this. But I got to a point where my body, in my brain, I think my mind also was like, you need to eat more. And that's what I did. But it wasn't good. It was because I was still trying to stay within my calorie allotment, but I wanted what I wanted. I wanted the things that aren't the best for you. I wanted those things that we just crave, the sweet, the salty, the things that I had so heavily restricted, and I was eating it in secret because I felt ashamed that I couldn't control myself and stay within my caloric allotment, and I felt ashamed that like I didn't want people seeing me eat after we just ate supper, like copious amounts of this or that. I didn't want the comments made, so I snuck the food, and that kind of snowballed. So finish up 11th grade, and because I was binge eating in the evenings, I was putting weight on. I remember towards the end of classes in the spring, I could feel like my jeans were getting tighter, but I couldn't control myself. I couldn't control my eating. My secretive over binge eating, and it got worse. And not having the routine of school and being home throughout the summer did not help, because I didn't have a lot of distractions. So I didn't have being in class and doing homework to keep me from eating. I remember during the summer, friends of my mom and me were having like a pampered chef party, and I didn't want to go because I had been eating so much that day, and I was bloated, I was full, I was ashamed. I felt like people could see like how much weight I'd put on. And looking back, I hadn't ballooned, bluntly, I hadn't ballooned. I had put weight on, but I didn't look unhealthy. I didn't look overweight, but I didn't feel good. I was so full, and I don't know if I knew this when my mom left to go, but I know I did it. When she left, I got out some dry cereal, and I just ate and ate and ate and ate. And it was like, I didn't feel good. Part of me liked it because I felt like I was rebelling, like I'm in control of this, but in reality, I was not in control. And my belly was already so full, and I was just shoving more food in. It was not good. And that's the only reason I didn't go. Like, I liked the people. I liked the people who were going to be at the Pampered Chef party. At that point, I enjoyed cooking and baking, and food had a grip on me. So I get towards the end of summer, and it's back to school time, and I remember having thoughts of like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely not as thin as I was last year at this time. Like, what are people going to think of me? And no one said a word. Like, I didn't have a ton of friends, but the people I hung out with were kind to me, and no one said anything about my weight. And I'm so grateful for that, because I don't know I don't know how I would have handled that. But I remember, like, I knew I couldn't keep doing that. Like, I knew it was bad for my body. And I remember trying to like just convince myself, like, this is really bad for your body, like physically bad for your body, like your internal, like you're stretching your stomach more than it needs to be, you're forcing food through your digestive system, like the morning after, like your belly has a hangover. Like, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how to stop. And I never told anyone. Like that I was calorie counting. I never told anyone that I was struggling with binge eating, and I didn't feel that I could tell anyone, because either they wouldn't understand, or it would be like, well, just stop. And yeah, like I wish I could have. I remember like trying to make myself just stop, and it didn't work. I remember Halloween that year, I had got on Tumblr. Have any of you ever been on Tumblr? Did you have a Tumblr account? Do you still have a Tumblr account? I liked my Tumblr account. I didn't really post content a lot. I just like reblogged, reposted other posts. And there's some really unhealthy sides of the internet, including pro-anorexia accounts. There were pro-anorexia accounts on Tumblr. And even at that point, you could report them because they were promoting destroying your body. But I created my Tumblr account to try to get healthy, like following accounts of people who like were posting like healthy food, workouts, but along with that was hard to attain like physiques with low body fat percentages, with muscle. And I think it's not impossible to get that, but at that point where I was mentally and physically and emotionally, like that was not, it was unrealistic for me and it wasn't helpful. But Halloween that year of my senior year, I remember I was like, okay, I'm gonna starve myself. I was like, okay, we're not going to eat today. And I remember I went over to a friend's house because we were involved in something that we had to go to the high school for, Halloween related. It was like a fun frolic. And do you guys even know what that is? There's this Halloween event for kids that we were working at. And I think I ended up eating that night. And I think there was one other day that year, maybe in the winter, where I was challenging myself not to eat. And basically I laid in bed all day because it was like I knew I wouldn't be able to not eat if I got up. Like someone would notice that I hadn't eaten. And naturally it didn't work. I only did it a couple days because I knew that was not sustainable. That was not good for me. So looking back at that point in my life, I had accepted Jesus as my Savior, but I was not walking with him. I was not walking in the faith. And I give all glory to God that even though my life it didn't feel good, like God was good. He allowed me to not get sucked into anorexia. He allowed me to not get sucked into bulimia, because there were a couple of times where I was kneeling over the toilet with my fingers down my throat and I could not throw up. And I'm so grateful that I couldn't, because I don't know if I could have walked away from that one time or if I would have kept doing it. So New Year's came around of senior year. I had also quit the other sport that I really enjoyed. I didn't do it my senior year. One reason had nothing to do with my health, but the other reason was because I was like, I don't know. I was so uncomfortable with my body. I was like, I can't imagine putting my uniform on. I just couldn't do it. But that New Year's came around and I joined the local gym. And that was so good for me. Like I challenged myself to being intentional with what I ate for breakfast, what I ate for lunch, what I ate for dinner. But I still struggled in the evenings. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that I may not have been feeding myself enough throughout the day, but also the habit and the mindset of like, you're free, you can eat whatever you want, like, but I don't want anyone to see you going crazy, like animalistic about like eating these off-limit bad foods. So I was still struggling with that, but going to the gym, I was doing some running at the time, but I was weightlifting, and that was so good for me mentally. And I think a lot of the reasons why I struggled with eating was mental. So I did not recover from binge eating the spring of my senior year. I did not recover over the summer, but I was still working out, and I was still trying to be intentional about eating better. And then I went off to college, and that first semester was hard because I don't like go out and like talk to people and make friends, but especially at that point in my life, because I was still really ashamed of my body and how I was eating. So I was definitely not like, oh, people are gonna see me and like, I don't feel good about myself. People aren't gonna feel good about me. So I can't say that. I am, again, very thankful for who my roommate was my freshman year, and the fact that she had a little community of her own, that they just accepted me. And I love them so much. I haven't talked to them in so long just because of geographical distance, but that was a huge help. But because it was so uncomfortable and like new place, new classes, new like eating in the dining hall by yourself, but you're around all these people, and being involved in a sports club that was very rigorous, I lost weight unhealthily though. Like I wasn't always eating enough, and I definitely was not eating enough during the sports season. And plus I had a PE class. Like if I had only been eating well, and I would have been such a stronger athlete. But looking back, I can't say if I had just, because I learned and I grew from what I went through, even though I wish I would have never had to go through it. But I was still struggling. I was still struggling with binge eating. And I remember Easter, my roommate and our friend group, we were doing like an Easter candy exchange. And so I went to the store and I picked up 2 things, and one of them is just a classic Easter candy for me, and then one other. And I binge ate the one thing that I was excited to give because it was special to me. And I felt so ashamed because I was only able to give him one thing, and it was small, and I was like, why are you like this about myself? And there are other instances where just like I missed out, or I wasn't able to do what I wanted because of me. I wasn't healthy. Another instance was my roommate and one of our friends wanted to go out one night, and they're like, come on, let's go. But I think I had overeaten, and I really wanted to binge on some candy that was in the room that wasn't normally in the room. And so I said no, and I stayed in the room by myself and overate and felt like junk. So it was not pleasant, like not the best time. But there were steps forward and steps back throughout the rest of college. And I had some weird eating habits. I still was binging, but I was still staying active. And I was always healthier when I had some sort of community around me, but I would self-isolate when I binged, when I felt like binging. So I was, self-sabotaging. So I was pulling away from the thing I needed to help me feel better, and in pulling away, I made myself feel worse. So after college, go on to corporate life. That's what I did. And I liked my job, but I was still struggling. And there were different methods, different things I tried to do to heal myself, to stop binge eating. And they always worked temporarily, but they didn't work because it wasn't like what I needed. There were benefits to it, but it wasn't going to heal the problem. I had told my best friend in college, I let her read my bio on my Tumblr account, which was pretty open, but it sugar-coated how well I was doing at the time. And so I told her, and because we had built a relationship, and I felt like I could trust her with that. And she was supportive of that, but I made it sound like I was basically okay. And then a couple years after college, I told someone else, and at that point I felt comfortable telling them because I had trust with them, but also I didn't have as much shame because at that point it felt like the chains had fallen off. Like I didn't feel like I was under the control of food anymore. Like I still struggled, but I felt like I was starting to actually live my life. Like my life didn't revolve around food. It wasn't controlled by food. Like I felt like I was trying to find purpose in life, and it got a lot better. I was still being active. I had a gym membership. I went several times a week, but I still wanted to be better. I wanted to be normal again, and I knew I could never go back to like early 10th grade normal because that just wasn't feasible. It's not reality. And then in 2020, like I felt like I was doing pretty well. I still overate a lot in the evenings, and a lot of that was like, oh, you're just gonna go to bed so you don't have to feel like, if you feel bad, you're just going to bed, and then you'll feel mostly better in the morning. So it was like I rationalized the chaos of it. But in 2020, I started working from home, and working from home, like I felt like I was spiraling. I felt like I was losing the progress and the healing that I had made, the progress I had made. And so I switched to a mostly plant-based whole food diet. Again, like no scientific research. I watched a documentary, I'm just being honest with you, and it was the benefits of eating a plant-based whole food diet, whether it be athletic performance or circulation of your blood throughout your body. And at that point I was like, I need something. I need to try something because I cannot go backwards. I cannot go back to binge eating. Mentally, physically, nothing was good. Nothing was good with doing that. So I did switch to mostly plant-based whole food diet. That would be my focus for breakfast, lunch, and snacks. And I would try to do that with dinner, but I was still going to drink like some cow's milk, like eat eggs, eat cheese. I still ate quite a lot of cheese and meat. Like I wasn't going to completely cut out animal products just because I don't want to. And I still ate more than I needed to. Like the intuitive eating wasn't quite there, but I noticed as time went on, I wasn't struggling as much. And I attribute that to me getting nutrients that my body was missing. Sometimes when we're hungry, and we don't feel hungry, it's because our body needs something. So my theory is that eating the plant-based whole food diet majority of the time, my body was getting the nutrients that it needed. So I wasn't having cravings as much. I was eating a more substantial breakfast, a more substantial lunch. I was eating probably more appropriate sized meals to fuel and fill my belly and fuel my body. So with that, I was starting to incorporate back in more animal products. So I wasn't just doing plant-based whole food, like I would have some eggs in the morning or something, but still with the focus of an emphasis on fruits and veggies and whole grains and whole foods and just the quality of the food, eating less processed food, which I never ate a ton of processed food anyway, but like just putting an emphasis on the quality of the food. And I consider myself healed from binge eating. I still struggle sometimes, and I'm still learning what my triggers are for wanting to eat when I'm not hungry. And I have learned what they are. And sometimes I can be like, okay, let's fix this now. But sometimes I stumble, and that's okay. And that's why I'm starting this channel, starting this podcast, whichever medium that you guys are listening, watching, is I want you, if you're struggling now, or if you're along somewhere in your healing journey, or if you also feel like you've healed, just to know that you're not alone. Know that there is hope for healing and growing and getting better and getting healthier. Sharing with you my passion for health and food and fitness, because binge eating, food addictions is not like drugs or alcohol in the sense that you cannot quit cold turkey. Some people can quit things cold turkey, some people can. Food, you cannot do that with. Food is good. Food is fuel for our body. But you don't want food to control your life. And since I've healed from food having that control on my life, life has still happened. Things have still happened. But now I'm able to put more of my energy into being with friends, being with family, serving God in whichever ways He leads me to. And I hope this is one of those ways, because God is good all the time, even when life doesn't feel good. So if you guys are interested in sticking around, hearing me talk more about health and food and fitness, and having a community of people who are striving to heal and be healthier, whether it's for themselves, for their families, for their friends, consider subscribing, because I would love to see you back here. Now, if you're interested in why this podcast is called Over for Coffee, click here right on screen, and I'll see you guys there.